大家好，欢迎大家收看安娜看法节目。今天我们要聊的话题是 Laken Riley 法案。最近这项法案在美国引起了很多的讨论，尤其是在移民的群体当中。它的核心内容就是说要加强对某些非美国公民的拘留和执法的力度，特别是在涉及刑事犯罪的情况下。那么这项法案到底是什么意思呢？它会影响哪些人呢？如果说你是非美国公民，是否需要担心呢？今天我们非常荣幸地邀请到了安娜律师楼的创始人安娜戴米奇 Anna Damici 律师，来为我们大家解读这项法律的关键点。Hi Anna, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, and thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
安娜律师想请问你Laken Riley 法案到底是什么呢？它为什么会被提出来呢？ Anna, what is the Laken Riley Act and why was it introduced?
So Laken Riley Act is a very sad act because it was brought about by a murder of a young woman, a nursing school student in Georgia last year. This young woman was killed by someone from Venezuela, someone who apparently came here unlawfully. And this act was actually a reaction by the public to the Biden administration policy of allowing lots and lots of immigrants to cross the border, practically unvetted, and also not utilizing ICE and DHS to go ahead and detain the ones who came unvetted and then started committing crimes, starting causing chaos here in this country and creating a lot of sadness, creating basically a lot of terror for the citizens and also other immigrants. So this was basically a reaction to this murder. It was a beautiful young woman who was also a nursing school student with a lot of promise, great profession. She was about to help a lot of people, and then she was just killed so senselessly. This is what brought about with Laken Riley Act.
好，非常感谢安娜律师的介绍这项法案到底是什么时候通过的呢？到底什么时候开始正式执行呢？ Anna, when was the act passed and when does it take effect?
So it was passed just a few days ago in the end of January. It is going to take effect approximately 3 months later, 90 days later. So probably end of April is when we're going to see enforcement across the board, right? And it's a federal law, so it's going to apply to all of the states. It's going to apply to immigrants in all of the states.
刚才你也提到了这个法案对于强制拘留有一个规定，那到底是什么样的规定呢？ Anna, just now you mentioned the mandatory detention, right? So what does the act say about mandatory detention?
Right. So the key provision of the act is mandatory detention of non-citizens, right? It says aliens. It does not distinguish between different categories of non-citizens for certain types of crimes, right? And the important part here is that the crimes included in it some of them are have not been considered very serious criminal offenses by the previous administration, for example. So the offenses that are included for mandatory detention are theft, larceny, burglary, and shoplifting, right? That's in addition to assaulting a law enforcement officer or causing injuries or killing someone while driving drunk. But the last two is something you could expect, right? They're serious offenses. So you would think that ICE would step in and deal with the problem if something like this happens. But the previous set, theft, burglary, larceny, and shoplifting, are the offenses that we did not see as being offenses that called for detention by the DHS previously. Now I want to make a couple key points here. We're talking about detention by the DHS, not regular criminal detention, right? Not when a person is apprehended and held without bail, for example, or held on high bail, for example, right? By the criminal system. No, this is a very separate detention by the Department of Homeland Security. It's going to be important. I'll explain later why. And the second key point is that the DHS is not going to wait for the people to be convicted, right? The detention has to happen at the point of criminal charges, at the point of accusation. So it's enough to simply be charged by the criminal system for the DHS to step in and detain someone.
好，非常感谢律师的介绍这个法案对于非美国公民的刑事案件程序到底会有什么样的影响呢？和美国公民的待遇有什么样的不同呢 Anna, how does the act change the criminal process for non-U.S. citizens compared to U.S. citizens?
The U.S. citizens are not subject to DHS detention. So if there is, for example, a criminal case brought against a U.S. citizen, all the U.S. citizen has to deal with is criminal justice system. So for example, the case starts, there is either a citation to show up in court or there are criminal charges and there's a criminal detention, and then the case basically goes smoothly from there. Now, with the detention by the DHS, something completely different happens, right? And this, like I said earlier, it applies to all kinds of non-citizens, including green card holders, right? Even the most stable category, the green card holders. So nobody is protected from it. What happens is, for example, if criminal charges are brought against a green card holder, even if the criminal court deems the green card holder safe enough to let them go without bail or on bail, but basically release them from pre-trial detention and let them go home and just come in to court for the hearings, the DHS is supposed to step in and detain that person instead. So even if you post bail or even if the judge allows you to go home, still the DHS is supposed to take over and put you in DHS facility for detention.
好，谢谢安娜啊。还想请问您的是，被拘留者的这个律师的权利会不会受到影响呢？Anna, does the act affect the right to legal representation for detained individuals?
So it does not affect the right, but it does affect the legal representation from a very practical standpoint. And that practical standpoint is that basically, to put it bluntly, DHS detention makes prosecution of the criminal case extremely difficult and inconvenient. And when I say prosecution of the criminal case, I don't just mean that it's harder for the district attorneys, for the prosecution to prosecute, but it's harder for all sides because the person is detained in DHS facility. What that means? That means that for the court hearings, a lot of times the U.S. Marshals are not going to be really good at bringing this person to court for the court hearing. It's just, we know it from practice, we know it from Trump's previous term. The federal marshals are really not good at maintaining at coordinating this and bringing people over, and that just delays the whole case. That's one problem. Problem number two, DHS often likes to shuffle people between different facilities to make room for some because it's logistically it's more convenient for them. Sometimes they can even ship someone out of state. You know, multiple times I've seen cases where, for example, we would have clients detained in one location, let's say in Los Angeles, and then we try to go visit them. But then on the day of the visit, we check the website, the inmate locator, and we find out that this person has been shipped somewhere to Texas. So ICE does it, DHS does it to the people locked up in detention facilities, and that essentially stops criminal defense attorneys from being able to go and see the client and from being able to have meaningful communication with a client, because meaningful communication with a client on a criminal case involves sitting down and reviewing the evidence, for example, right? You have to bring files, you have to show the client what the government has against them, you have to discuss things. And if a person has been shipped to another part of the country, then criminal defense lawyer will have a very hard time getting access to their defendant, to their client, to the defendant, to help them fight the case. And practically speaking, it's a very big issue. I think it's going to get litigated at some point, especially if it once the number of cases accumulates, because even though officially nobody is denying anyone right to defense counsel, practically this is what really happens. Actually, on my law firm YouTube channel, myself and my colleague Michael Wall, she's a criminal defense lawyer with lots of with about 40 years of experience, we discuss what happens when the DHS takes over the case at great length.
还想请问一下律师一个问题：现在缴纳保释金是不是会更加危险呢？很有可能会有什么样的后果呢？Anna, why might posting bail be riskier under this act? What are the potential consequences?
So the potential consequence of posting bail is that instead of being allowed to get released and go home, the defendant then gets transferred into ICE custody, right? And like I just mentioned, instead of being able to show up to the hearings, or instead of having the local criminal jail bring this person to the hearings, what ends up happening is once you're stuck in immigration detention, federal marshals, federal facilities are really not good at coordinating court appearances with local criminal courts, right? So posting bail in criminal proceedings could actually make your criminal case significantly worse, significantly longer, and a lot more difficult to handle. Basically, it's really, really hard to provide meaningful defense. So if this happens, or if there are criminal charges, criminal proceedings, and for example, there's an option whether to come out on bail and the family can post bail, for example, sometimes we would advise the family and advise the client not to post bail because it's actually easier and faster to resolve a criminal case without being transferred to immigration detention. It's easier to stay in local jail because local jail is much better at cooperating with the court than immigration facilities.
安娜律师还想请问您哈，这个法案是适用于所有非美国公民吗？还是说只针对某些人呢？Does the act apply to all non-U.S. citizens or just certain groups?
So as of now, the way the act is written, yes, it does apply to all non-US citizens. And that's the danger of it, right? So you can be a green card holder with 25 years in the country, and it's going to apply to this person quite just as much as it would apply to someone who crossed the border unlawfully, right? I don't know if it's going to remain the same way. I don't know if there will be any clarifications. I don't know if maybe at some point some kind of enforcement guidelines will be issued. So the law is this, but we're going to be enforcing it differently. Maybe, I don't know. But as of now, yes, it does apply to all non-citizens.
安娜律师还想请问您啊，非美国公民可以做些什么来避免这项法案带来的法律风险呢？What can non-U.S. citizens do to protect themselves under this act?
So I think the best approach is, I guess there are two best things to do, right? One is to definitely avoid getting caught even by accident in any kind of charges like shoplifting, for example, right? And we know that sometimes shoplifting charges are brought over even accidents. For example, you're getting some items and then you get a phone call that your child in daycare fell down, right? And you need to come and pick up the child and take her to the ER, and you rush out of the store. And so sometimes that's when people get stopped for shoplifting. So avoid any kind of this sort of practical incidents that could potentially lead to criminal charges. Right? So just do whatever it takes to prevent. Number two that can be done is sometimes there is a way, even if there was, let's say, a citation, even if police came and there is a probable cause for them to believe that someone has committed shoplifting, but they don't want to arrest the person, they issue a citation with a date to appear in court. Between that time and the court date, sometimes it's possible to avoid having the criminal charges brought in altogether, right? And the way to do it is, and we do it quite a bit in our law firm, is we contact the DA and we basically provide them with an argument and a lot of evidence for why the charges should not be brought, right? And it does work, especially in less serious cases. There is sometimes a chance, not every time, but it has worked a number of times for a number of our clients, for example. And so just because there is a citation, just because something happened, it might not be the end of the world. So find a competent criminal defense lawyer and try to do whatever possible to avoid criminal charges being brought.
好，说的非常好，非常感谢安娜律师介绍。安娜还想请问一下你啊，到底什么是缓解材料呢？它在刑事案件当中到底有什么样的作用呢？What is the mitigation packet and how can it help in criminal cases?
So mitigation packet is an essential part of resolving a criminal case or preventing criminal case from being officially filed, Evan. It's basically a packet consisting of character evidence and sometimes also an argument that there is not enough evidence to even bring the case. Right? So yes, if there is an argument and we can make it, for example, the person actually had an alibi, it was a mistaken identity, this person was not shopping at that point, somebody else was, and we have that evidence, we would usually present it as part of mitigation packet sometimes, right? And another part is character evidence, meaning we're going to show the DA that the defendant is actually a good person, a law-abiding person, no criminal record, and this person is a very good member of the community. So what we recommend is getting character letters from friends and relatives. If the person is, for example, doing something good for the community, like donating to local charities or volunteering in church or in animal shelter, I don't know, coaching or teaching somebody foreign language for free, just bring all this evidence and show the DA that basically whatever happened was really insignificant, but it can really mess up this very good person's life. So maybe let's try to avoid bringing charges. You know, and like I said, sometimes it works.
安娜律师，这项法案啊和以前的移民执法政策到底有什么样的不同呢？是不是说移民政策又变更加严格了呢？Anna, how does the Laken Riley Act compare to previous immigration enforcement policies? Is this another step toward stricter immigration laws?
So compared to the previous administration's policies, definitely it restricts them. It makes them much harsher because, again, we're talking about all kinds of all categories of non-citizens being affected, and also we're looking at crimes that have previously been considered not very serious, right? Such as shoplifting, for example. It could be something very minor. Right, so it does, in fact, make quite a drastic change from previous immigration policies. Now, another thing to remember here is that just because certain crimes are not mentioned in the Laken Riley Act, it does not mean that they're not going to be prosecuted. I'm talking about this current administration, right? Because Laken Riley Act is only one of the pieces of legislation, one of the pieces of guidance that the law enforcement has from the president, from the legislature. This one is actually coming from the legislature because it's the law. It comes from Congress and Senate. All right, so it's only one of the pieces of legislature that they're using, but there have been certain executive orders, and I expect there might be more executive orders and also other types of guidance that direct the law enforcement, especially immigration enforcement, to go harder on people. And I'm specifically mentioning immigration enforcement here because the government, the executive branch of the government, meaning the president, has a lot of authority over immigration. They have a little bit less authority over, let's say, criminal defense and things that have to do with criminal defense and criminal laws, but they do have a lot of authority when it comes to immigration enforcement. So I would say just because only a certain number of crimes are included here, I do expect harsher enforcement across the board.
好，今天非常感谢安娜律师，让我们非常清楚地了解到了 Laken Riley 法案啊，它让移民执法更加的严格，特别是在涉及刑事案件的时候，非美国公民很有可能面临更大的法律风险。所以说，如果你是非美国公民的话，一定要了解自己的权利，而且在必要的时候寻求专业律师的帮助。好，今天非常感谢安娜律师为我们带来的专业的分析。Thanks again, Anna. Always great hearing your insights. We'll see you next time.
Happy to share. Thank you.